Bringing on this next guest, we've got PFF's NFL analyst Brad Spielberger joining us. And Brad, before I jump into some football questions, I gotta ask you, are you the analytics dude with a goatee or the guy who directed E.T.?
Fortunately, I'd like the reverse to be true, right? I wish I was Steven Spielberg and not an analytics guy with a goatee, but you'll have to take me as I am, I suppose.
Well, we're really happy to have you, and thanks for joining us today. And I got to start with Russ and the quarterback position for this Broncos team, because there's so many metrics out there, stats that you can point to say that Russ is a really good quarterback, like passer rating. He has the 6th best passer rating in the NFL this year. QBR, on the other hand, says he's the 20th best quarterback in the NFL. With you guys over at PFF, you take a different approach and look at so many different things. With that being said, how is Russ doing this year?
Yeah, I think the conversation's interesting because I think there are people trying to use kind of the way he's playing and how he's being deployed as a negative, where I think it's more Sean Payton is coming in and saying, look, you're not 25 years old anymore. You're a different athlete, a different player. We still do want some of that, Russ magic, dancing around, throwing, these beautiful prayers up in the air to a Cortland Sutton that have hit, a half dozen times or so in recent weeks. But realistically, we want more of a quicker drop-back passing game. We want a lot of throws underneath, trust our athletes to make plays in space, to rack up yards after the catch. We want to spread the football around, get the tight ends involved, get the running backs involved. So is it like what we're used to seeing from Russ? Not really. And is he maybe driving the offense as much as he maybe did 5 years ago in Seattle? Maybe not. But his pressure to sack rate has come down, so eliminating a lot of those negatives. And so even if there aren't as many splashy positives, I think it is the correct approach for this version of Russell Wilson. He's been good.
I have a few questions as a former player. I won't go into all the grades I've gotten, but just wanted to talk to you about how you guys grade.
I'm not a grader, I promise.
How you guys understand defenses, because even looking at Vance Joseph's defense, and I don't think I understand a play call that we used to run with him in the past, and I talked to the linebackers that are on the team now, and they're actually running something different. How do you guys kind of dissect and understand the plays from an outsider looking in?
Yeah, so look, it's not perfect. I won't tell you it is, and I would hope no one says it is, but it's funny. You mentioned kind of you're asking former teammates. We will look first at our own database. If we identify something, all right, this is quarters, this is cover 6, this is whatever, we'll then go look at that defensive coordinator. And again, things can change over time, but look in that season or look over a number of seasons at the tendencies and responsibilities that have derived from that specific type of play. And then if all else fails, we'll reach out to teams and say, hey, we want to get this right. We're not asking you to kind of tip your hand as to what you're doing, but we think it's quarter, half here. Are we correct? Are we seeing it incorrectly? Was there a busted coverage that maybe, we thought it was cover 6 because of that busted coverage, but really it was supposed to be quarters, yada, yada, yada. So the simple answer is, sometimes we probably do get it wrong. The more complicated answer is we're going to the ends of the earth, annoying people, emailing, texting, whatever, trying to get it as accurate as humanly possible, and try in good faith to always do so, and are always welcome to feedback. You never emailed me or DM'd me back in the day, but I get those every once in a while from some current players.
I actually have a couple of old grade sheets. If you want to correct something, I'll definitely send them through.
Yeah, send them over.
I was actually trying to look up Todd's career PFF grade before we did this. It's funny, this is kind of like a full circle moment, because Zach and I used to cover Todd when he was playing for the Broncos, and now he's on set with us. And I specifically remember a moment where Todd was complaining about his PFF grade in the locker room. I'm going to go a little more broad on you, because I brought this up today, and I want to hear how crazy you think I am. I said on the show today that I believe the Denver Broncos can win the Super Bowl. How crazy am I?
I think you're a little crazy. I do. I'll say this. Starting looking outside the team, I thought the AFC was going to be this gauntlet of juggernaut-type teams, and it's not. Not in any way, shape, or form. There are glaring issues for even the top teams, even a Baltimore, who I love, without Mark Andrews. They did play well against the Rams, and Odell's kind of coming into stride a little bit, but you could poke holes there. Miami, we saw against Tennessee that defense getting picked apart late in the game. I love that matchup for Miami with the Vic Fangio defense that takes away explosives, and Will Levis was hitting deep shot after deep shot. Go down the list, essentially. You can poke holes in pretty much every good AFC team. So maybe I don't think you're as crazy as I initially thought. I do wonder Like when it gets to playoff football, right? And teams are taking away your best option. Let's say Cortland Sutton is removed from a game. And I know there have been plenty of games this year where he's like dormant through 3 quarters and explodes at the end of games, stuff like that. That's where I wonder when the matchups are more specific, when teams are focusing more and more on the scouting and all of those things, can Denver still rise above and win some of those games? But yeah, the competition is not as scary as it looked.
Without asking you to like go game by game and predict how it's actually going to unfold, we were also having the conversation. The Broncos are only 1 game back of the Chiefs right now for the top of the AFC West. So the conversation in Denver's kind of shifted a little bit from like, well, maybe make the playoffs now to like, whoa, can they actually win the AFC West? With what you've seen from the Chiefs, do you think that's something that could happen and that shift could happen in the final 4 weeks of the season?
I mean, there's a decent argument you could win out, right? I mean, Detroit is reeling right now. Their defense is just a mess. And it's not even really Aaron Glenn's fault, in my opinion, the DC. It's just you lose Lee McNeil, who I think is the anchor on the interior of that defense, some secondary injuries throughout the course of the season, and they just have not been able to defend the last 6-7 weeks. So that's the toughest matchup by a country mile, right, of the 4 remaining. And, yeah, in Detroit, always going to be a challenge. So the Kansas City issue at this point, I think we all know the receivers are struggling, top 5 for us in drop rate. And things of that nature. I think quietly, though, the protection hasn't been good enough either. Like, I think Mahomes can overcome one of the two. I'm not trying to say, like, he had some bad throws, too. The Sky Moore interception was just a bad throw. There's some other issues with him. But, like, he's been able to overcome either bad protection or bad receiving. Right now it's both, right? And so it's, like, it's tough to envision them scoring a lot of points. They're laying 9.5 points at New England, and as crazy as it sounds, like they probably shouldn't be laying that many points on the road against the Bill Belichick defense. So the thing for me, though, is their defense now, youngest defense in the NFL by average age, and I think is a top 5, top 10 caliber unit in the NFL. I think that's what's going to save them for now. But I guess kind of a long-winded answer. But no, Denver could pull it off. But Kansas City's not dead just yet.
It's fair.
So this week, the Broncos have the Detroit Lions, and they've been up and down, having kind of a roller coaster season. Jared Goff has been playing really well. In your eyes, from all the film that you've seen, what is the Broncos' key to success to really being able to win in Detroit?
Yeah, I mean, I think you do need to attack the boundaries in particular. Like if you're trying to, we just talked about, like a lot of quick underneath game. I think they have gotten good play from an Alex Anzalone. I love their safeties, even after losing Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Brian Branch, Tracy Walker, Kirby Joseph. Like I think they do a good job still over the intermediate and deep parts of the middle of the field. But then you need to throw kind of on their outside corners. Like Cam Sutton's solid. Jerry Jacobs has been struggling, got burned by DJ Moore for a touchdown this past week. And then you got to run the football. And for that, I want you to run between the tackles, right? I mean, I mentioned Lee McNeil, who I think is probably the second best player on this team behind Aiden Hutchinson. And frankly, you could run at Hutchinson a decent bit too. But yeah, so run the football a ton, get in second and short, third and short, but then not be afraid to throw outside the numbers, which obviously Russ, generally is not afraid to do.
When you look at these Broncos, the personnel from last season has not changed much, but the team has changed a whole hell of a lot. What kind of coaching job do you think Sean Payton has done with this team?
It's not great, and I think he set the tone right away, right? He goes out, you add a guy like a Mike McGlinchey at right tackle who maybe hasn't been perfect. His pass block grade for us is probably not all that sparkly, but like you set a tone and you establish what you want to do. Like I said, we want to turn Russ back into the 20 to 25 passing attempts, set up play action, create these shot plays, these explosive, get him out of the kitchen. He's not cooking anymore, but he's playing more efficient football. And I think you've seen that. And then, frankly, I think Vance Joseph deserves a ton of credit. Obviously, the start was terrible. 70 points was crazy. You've seen both with how he's deploying personnel, but also what he's doing. I think he's adapting on the fly and doing things differently. I know I tweeted about Jaquan McMillan. You bring him on 7 pressures or 7 blitzes last week. He gets home on 5 of them for a pressure at least. But also Zach Allen's been a revelation. I think has been awesome, pretty much the entire season. But also just like what they've done to kind of work through different players. Haven't been the most injured unit, but just using guys differently, moving Zach Allen around a little bit too. Like they've been creative, and I think Vance just needed a month or so to see how things worked out. You got Singleton flying, up on pressures. It's just it's been fun to watch.
Yeah, and I mean, fun to watch. Jaquan McMillan has been so fun to watch, and I noticed that he had caught your eye. I think there's a case to be made that he's the defensive player of the year for the Broncos this year. What stood out to you from an outsider's perspective about Jaquan?
Yeah, it was early on. Like you saw some of the nickel blitzes and some of the stuff they were doing. I mean, he'll run the alley and come up in the muck and make plays against the run as well as any nickel corner in football right now too. And I think that's an important role, in this Vance Joseph defense. Like, yeah, it's zone heavy, but you do need some of those guys. Either to contain and not let guys get outside the spill players, or just come up and make a play. And he'll throw his body around. He's not afraid of really anything. And like it reminds me of some of these fun kind of strong safety nickel type hybrids that look, not the greatest coverage player, but if you want a guy that can come up and make plays near the line of scrimmage down in the box, he's just, I don't know. He caught my eye just watching the games on Sunday. Like I haven't done a full just watch him deep dive on tape, but he's a very fun player.
So we talked about defense. I want to talk about offense and specifically this offensive line. And I want to kind of get your opinion on who on this offensive line has impressed you with their performance, and who do you feel like is kind of underwhelming with how they performed, within this unit.
Fascinating thing to me is, so I mentioned McGlinchey, and then you signed Ben Powers, who I think is like an opposite player, like a really good pass protector, not really a guy I would try to be getting to the second level and using on outside zone and different concepts. And then Bowles, we know, great pass protector on the left side. I think having a very good season. Happy to be winning for a change. Miners is awesome. I'm not a bad pass protector, but kind of a road grader on the right side. So it's almost like the right side is going to be just maulers in the run game, and the left side is going to be your pass protectors. And then for me, I would say Lloyd Cushenberry. I think he's been impressive. There have been probably too many penalties, but I think he really has solidified himself. We always knew he was a good athlete coming out, a good player. I think the game was a little bit too fast for him early on, and I just think he's calm and comfortable right now. Probably going to do pretty well for himself, in free agency. But he's been impressive. I just think I always thought highly of him. I was waiting for that guy to come out. Specifically, I think he's much better at identifying twists and stunts, and just seems more confident and comfortable, kind of anchoring the interior of that O-line.
Brad, I've got two bigger picture questions for you really quick. You mentioned free agency. You just dropped an awesome in-depth article of your top 50 free agents hitting the market this year. I noticed no Broncos were on there, but were there any guys that maybe the Broncos could target that you could see on that list being a good fit here in Denver?
Yeah, and I would say it's a good thing, right, to not have, you want talent, but obviously it's great. And Cushenberry will be on there, once it gets out to 75, 100, he'll pop up. But, yeah, I think if I'm them, I'd probably look for another corner. And there are some decent outside corners. I'm trying to think if Steven Nelson and Vance Joseph ever crossed paths and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But, there are some good, I think, like outside zone corners that I think, decent price could come in and really solidify that number 2 spot opposite of Patrick Surtain. So I'd look there. And then, as is always the case with pass catcher, they're probably all going to get franchise tagged. But I think there are some interesting names, like a Darnell Mooney in Chicago. If he gets out, bring him in as another guy who can win in the intermediate and deep parts of the field. You can throw tunnel screens too and let him make guys miss in space. Like a good complement to what they have right now. So I guess that's where I'd look.
Yeah, that's great. And my final question for you is, you're a cap expert. You know all about the cap. And we've talked about a little bit how tough it would be for the Broncos to move on from Russell Wilson cap-wise after this year. And there's still, I think the overall idea on Russ is still out in the final 4 games to be determined. Do you think Russ, considering the cap especially, do you think Russ is back in Denver next year?
It's becoming such a complicated and impossible, question to answer. I'm not trying to dodge it, but it's just fascinating because if you keep him this year, through next year, he's actually a larger dead cap hit, a larger financial burden in the future after next year, right? So he has been playing better football. There's no question about that. You're still having a ton of sunk costs, whether you move on this offseason or next. But we're talking about, you cut him this year, it could be $85 million in total dead cap. It goes to 86 a year later after locking in a $37 million fully guaranteed salary for 2025 when he's 37 years old, I want to say. So he has been good. It's no longer an easy decision. Whereas, ask me that question 2 months ago, I'm like, yeah, cut him right now if you want. It's not that easy anymore. It's not. But it's still not an automatic he's back either in my eyes.
Well, this has been awesome, Brad. Thank you so much for the insight. And for this interview, I'm happy that you're the analytics guy with the goatee, because I think we got a lot more from you than if you were the director of VT.
Yeah, we can talk Titanic next time. I appreciate you guys.
Right on.
See you,
Thanks
man.
so much for joining us, Brad. And make sure to check out his top 50 NFL free agents this year.